I'm recording this video with permission from Scholastic. So today, guys, we're going to be reading chapter 9 of Frindle. Just to review what happened in the last chapter, people started using Nick's word, remember, and not just Nick and his friends, but like all of the kids in the school. It said 80 different kids had to stay after school one day with Ms. Granger when they refused to stop using the word Frindle. And at the very end of the last chapter, we read, and about this time, the principal of Lincoln Elementary School paid a little visit to the home of Mr. and Mrs. Allen. She wanted to talk to them about their son, the one in 5th grade, the one named Nick. So the principal, we haven't learned her name yet, she is going to be visiting Nick's parents. And so I want you to stop and make a prediction about what you think is going to happen. Do you think that the principal is going to go talk to Nick's parents and Nick's parents will get Nick in trouble, or do you think they'll side with Nick? Do you think they'll agree with Miss Granger? What do you think is going to happen? I want you to stop and make a prediction and then think about what's going to happen as we read along. So chapter 9 is called Chess. Mrs. Margaret Chatham had been principal of Lincoln Elementary School for 18 years. She knew Mr. and Mrs. Allen well because they had all served together on the building committee when the old Lincoln School was torn down and the new one was built 6 years ago. It's kind of like what West Woodland is going to be doing next year. When she telephoned on the afternoon of October 1st to set up the meeting, Miss Chatham had asked Nick to be there too. It was 6:30 when she knocked and Nick opened the door. "Good evening, Nick," she said. No smile. "Hi, Miss Chatham," Nick said. Backing away, she filled the doorway. She was a large person, as tall as Nick's dad and with wide shoulders. Nick guessed she would play a linebacker on a football team because that's what his dad had played in college. Here's a picture of the principal meeting Nick and his family at the door. So you can tell she is very, very tall. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Allen," she said, stepping into the living room. She was wearing a long black raincoat with a red silk scarf tied loosely around her neck. She kept her coat on, but took off the scarf and tucked it into her left pocket. She shook hands stiffly with both Nick's parents before sitting down on the chair to the left of the couch. Nick's mom and dad sat on the couch, and Nick sat in the rocking chair that faced Miss Chatham across the low coffee table. "This is not an easy visit for me. We are having some trouble at school, and it appears that Nick is in the middle of it." Then, while Nick's parents listened, Miss Chatham laid out the story as she saw it. Nick encouraging the other kids to use his new word, Miss Granger forbidding it, the ruined 5th grade class picture, hundreds of kids staying after school, and a general feeling that there was a rebellion at the school, with no one respecting the rules anymore. Nick watched his mom and dad while Miss Chatham talked, looking from one face to another. His dad was listening carefully, nodding and frowning. He looked embarrassed about the trouble, but his mom looked kind of annoyed. And when Miss Chatham finished her story, Nick's mom was the first to speak. "But doesn't this all seem like a lot of fuss about something pretty silly?" Nick sat quietly, but in his mind he shouted, "Hurrah for Mom! Hurrah for mothers everywhere!" His mom wasn't annoyed with him. She was annoyed with Miss Granger, maybe even annoyed with Miss Chatham. This was getting interesting. Mrs. Allen was still talking to the principal. "I mean, is there really any harm in the children making up a funny word and saying it? Does there have to be a rule that a word like this may not be used?" But Miss Chatham sighed and said, "Yes, I suppose it does seem silly, but Miss Granger thinks that it's rather like keeping children from saying ain't. There have to be standards. That's why we have dictionaries. And really the problem isn't so much the word itself, it's the lack of respect for authority." Mr. Allen said, "Miss Granger is right about that. There have to be standards. We can't have kids walking around saying ain't, can we?" And that's when Nick piped in. "You know that big dictionary in Miss Granger's room? The word ain't is right there in the book. I looked it up, and there it was. I don't see why I can't use the word if it's in the dictionary." Miss Granger even said that her big dictionary was the law. Nick looked from face to face to face. That stumped them all. He had just launched a first-class thought grenade. "Well, yes, but, well, as I said, the word ain't and even the word Frindle, these are not the real issue here," said Miss Chatham. Miss Allen said, Well, I think the real issue is Miss Granger's reaction to a harmless little experiment with language. It's an overreaction. Don't you think so, Tom? And Miss Allen looked at her husband. It was Mr. Allen's turn to look from face to face to face. He was lost. Yes, well, sure. I guess so. I mean, it's not like anybody been hurt. I mean, it's not like vandalism or stealing or something like that. His sentence trailed off, and he rubbed his chin and stared thoughtfully through the window on the wall behind Miss Chatham. So, is this what you predicted? I want you to stop for a second. If you predicted that Nick's parents would side with him, or if you predicted that Nick's parents would side with Miss Granger, you're kind of seeing the best of both worlds. You're seeing this Mrs. Allen, Nick's mom, kind of thinking, oh yeah, this is an overreaction. It's not a big deal, and she's siding with Nick. But it does seem like Nick's dad's a little bit confused and conflicted, so let's see what happens. And while the three grown-ups sat there in the uncomfortable moment of silence, Nick had a sudden vision of what was really going on here. It was a chess game. Nick against Miss Granger. Miss Granger had just tried to end the game using her queen, Miss Chatham, in her black raincoat, the Black Queen. Nick didn't know it until the attack was underway, but he had a powerful defender of his own, good old Mom, the White Queen. And the game was not over. It would go on until there was a winner and a loser. Miss Chatham didn't stay much longer. There was a little more talk back and forth across the chessboard about how children have the right to explore new ideas, about the importance of respecting teachers and the work they do, and of everybody needing to keep standards and make school a safe place to learn. Then Mr. Allen offered Miss Chatham some coffee and banana bread, but she said, "No thanks, I really must be going now." She thanked Nick's parents, and they thanked her. Nick opened the door and said, "Good night, Miss Chatham." Then the Black Queen put on her red scarf and walked off into the October twilight. "Nick, I think we'd better talk a little bit more about this," said his mom, sitting back down on the couch. "If I find out that you've been disrespectful to Miss Granger or any other teacher in the school, then you really will be in big trouble." "I haven't been disrespectful, honest. I did get everyone to start using my word, but like you said, it's not hurting anybody. And I'm sorry if me and Dave and Pete got everybody to ask Miss Granger to borrow a Frindle. That was mean, I guess. But she started it by making kids stay after school and write 100 sentences just for saying my word once. And all the kids like to use my new word. It's just fun, that's all." "Well," said Nick's dad, "if it gets everyone upset and makes the principal come talk to your mother and me, then it must not be fun for everybody, is it? And I think you should just tell all your friends to knock it off right now. I mean, tomorrow." Nick shook his head. "I can't, Dad. It won't work. It's a real word now. It used to be just mine, but not anymore. If I knew how to stop it, I think I probably would. But I can't." And Nick looked at both their faces to see if that idea was sinking in. It was. "Like I said, I won't be disrespectful, but I do like my new word. And I guess now we're just going to have to see what happens." And the chessmen, Nick's king and queen, had to agree. The game would go on. Okay, so I want you guys to stop for a minute. I want you to stop and think about why this chapter is called Chess. So chapter 9 is called Chess. Why do you think that the author decided to title this chapter in this way? Because he does talk about chess in this chapter, but that's like usually the title of a chapter. If the author decides to give it a title, it means that it's kind of the overall theme. So where do you see that theme of chess come into play? So I want you to stop, pause the video, think about that, and then we'll come back together. Okay, so once you've thought about that, I want you to think, where did you see the theme of chess come up? We realize earlier on, after Miss Chatham had already come to Nick's house, he says, "Oh, I see. It's like a game of chess." So, how many of you guys have played chess before? Even though I can't see you, I want you to raise your hand if you played chess before. I'll keep my hand raised because I played it. So in chess, it's kind of like checkers where there's two different colors, two different sides. So Nick uses the colors black and white here. A lot of times they're black and white. And he realizes that Miss Granger wants to win, and so does he. And who does Miss Granger use as her queen? Miss Chatham. If you thought Miss Chatham in your head, you are correct. So Miss Chatham is the principal of the school, and so a queen is a really powerful piece in chess, and Mrs. Granger decided to pull out that powerful piece to try to get Nick to stop. But we learn at the very end that Nick kind of takes this, I call this a metaphor. So a metaphor is kind of it's using the game of chess to explain a greater social situation. So they're not actually playing chess in real life. They don't have the pieces out, but all of their actions and their strategies and how they're handling the situation feels a little bit like chess to Nick. So that's what the metaphor comes in. But here we see at the end, and the chessmen, Nick's king and queen, had to agree. The game would go on. So when they said had to agree, that means he's talking about his parents. So his parents seem like they're backing him up at the very end, because Nick realizes there's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser, and he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. So for our next thing, I want you to think about, what do you think? Do you think that Nick's being innocent and he's not really doing anything wrong? He's just using his new word? Or do you think, oh, Miss Granger has a point, she has rules, Nick needs to follow them? I want you to think about where you stand as the reader, because you can always have your own opinion as you read. So that's all for now. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.